Welcome everyone to the Marten's class story. We're on chapter 10 of the mystery of the hidden gold, and we're about to find out what's happening with Emily. It was the security guard. Frantically, Emily looked around for somewhere to hide. There was nothing in the corridor but a drinks vending machine set in a small alcove. She squeezed into the gap at the side of the machine and pulled Drift in with her. They kept very, very still, and they were very, very lucky, the guard might walk straight past them. They kept still, even though Drift's fur was tickling Emily's nose, but luck was not on their side. A pair of mirror-polished black boots came to a stop on the carpet tiles in front of the vending machine. The security guard sighed, and then there was a jingle of change. Oh no, he's going to buy a drink. Emily heard the coins drop. Then, ker-thunk, as the machine dropped a plastic cup into the dispenser and began squirting in hot coffee. The dispenser was millimetres from Drift's super-sensitive ears, and it was very loud ker-thunk. It was too much, even for a dog as highly trained in the art of undercover surveillance as Drift. He threw back his head and howled. The game was up. I don't know what you think you're playing at, young lady, the security guard boomed as Emily crawled out from her hiding place, but I'm sure the police will be able to find out. Emily stared at the shiny gold buttons on his jacket, trying to think of something to say, anything that wouldn't just dig the hole she was in even deeper. At that moment, the door of the meeting room opened and Mr. Tanaka and his 3 accomplices stepped out into the corridor. Mr. Tanaka raised his eyebrows. Hello, Emily. What are you doing here? Emily glared at him. This whole mess was entirely his fault. The security guard tried to hide the look of surprise on his jowly face. You know this girl? Mr. Tanaka nodded. Well, she claims to have something of yours to return. Mr. Tanaka patted his trouser pocket. Oh, I don't think I've lost anything. Hand it over, missy, the guard said triumphantly. Emily had no choice but to take the envelope out of her bag and hand it to Mr. Tanaka. Frowning slightly, he tore it open and held up a blue and white card. The words Carrickstowe Library Services were clearly printed for all to see. If that's a credit card, I'm a performing seal, the security guard laughed. His hand was already reaching for his phone. No doubt he had the police station on speed dial. Emily braced herself for serious trouble. But to her astonishment, Mr. Tanaka smiled. Incredible, isn't it? Looks just like an ordinary library card. You never know it was really a credit card. It's a new security technology that's just coming online in Japan. You see, thieves don't bother stealing these because they look worthless. May I? One of the businessmen standing behind Mr. Tanaka took the card and held it up to the light. Amazing what they can do these days. I want one of these. Emily was dumbstruck. Where was the shouting? Where was the finger pointing and the handcuffs and the dog catcher? Just you wait till your parents hear about this. Mr. Tanaka turned to Emily. Thank you for returning it to me. Clever of you to realise it was valuable. Yes, well, get that dog out of here. The security guard turned on his heels and stomped down the corridor. Emily looked at the carpet. I'm sorry, she mumbled. I thought you were a spy. Funny how something that sounded perfectly sensible when it was in your head could sound so idiotic when you said it out loud. Mr. Tanaka smiled at Emily. I realised the other day that you had me under observation. You were quite right to suspect me that I'm not a fudge salesman, but neither am I a spy. My company is investing a great deal of money in reopening the old fish processing factory in Carrickstowe. It will mean hundreds of new jobs and be a huge boom for industry in Cornwall, but we didn't want the media to hear about it before the deal was complete. That's why I've been tucked away at the lighthouse rather than at one of the big hotels where I might be recognised. Well, that and the fact that I adore old lighthouses. Anyway, I'm happy to say that we've just finalised the last few details and will be going public this afternoon. Emily felt her face burning with shame. She could hardly lift her eyes from the carpet tiles. "I'm so sorry. We thought you'd taken a map of ours." Mr. Tanaka smiled and held up his hand. "Not guilty. Now, I must go and prepare for the press conference." Halfway along the corridor, he turned and called back. "Oh, and by the way, Emily, you might want to call in at the library on your way home and renew your card. It expires in 6 weeks. It expired 6 weeks ago." Next morning, Emily called a meeting with Scott and Jack to compare notes. They met on the rocks above the inlet hallway along the promontory where Emily kept her rowing boat, Gemini. It was a place they could talk without being overheard. Emily pulled out her notebook and turned to Operation Map Thief. "Okay, let's have the full report," she said, her pen poised over the page. Jack grinned. "You mean you've not seen the papers this morning?" He pulled a copy of the Crackstow Times out of the backpack and held it up. On the front page was a photo of Scott outside the House of Horrors, looking super cool with his hands in the pockets of his jeans and his sun-streaked brown hair flopping across his face, although he was wearing a slightly bemused expression. The headline above the picture screamed, "Teenage hero saves Spider-Man from zombie death plunge." "The reporters must love Scott," Jack laughed. "How often do they get a headline like that?" Emily looked at Scott and slowly laid down her pen. "And this was your idea of undercover surveillance?" Jack clasped his hands and batted his eyelashes at Scott. "Our teenage hero couldn't help himself." Scott thumped his brother's arm and then recounted the full story. "But anyway," he concluded, "none of the Hartleys said anything about the treasure map all day. They didn't take it." Emily shook her head. Nor did Mr. Tanaka. She tucked her knees under her chin and told the boys about her eventful visit to Weston Mitchell. "I feel really bad about suspecting him. Mr. Tanaka's the nicest man you could meet." Jack grinned. He'd have given anything to be a fly on the wall when Emily dragged out from behind the vending machine, with Drift doing his werewolf impression. Although he had to admit, disguising herself as a pack of toilet rolls to get inside the building had been a stroke of pure genius. "So you didn't exactly stay under the radar either," he teased. Emily couldn't help smiling. "I think you could say we all blew it. But at least we've made some progress." "Oh yeah? Like what?" Scott asked. "We've eliminated 2 of the main suspects from our inquiries," Emily pointed out. She'd ruled 3 lines through the names on her notebook. "So now, down to Mrs. Loveday and Dotty," Scott asked. Jack gazed out across the harbour and the bay. In the distance, Gull Island sparkled like an iceberg in the morning sun. It was taunting them. "Why don't we just jump in Gemini and head over there now? You never know. We might just find the gold." "Spend the day poking around in the mountains of bird poo, more likely," Scott said. "Exactly," Emily agreed. "We'd be better off concentrating on finding the map." "Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Wading through bird poo was bad enough, but as far as Jack was concerned, it would be walk in the park compared to stalking Mrs. Loveday. I wish we'd solved those clues on the map before it was stolen. Then it might have been worth going to look," Scott said. As he spoke, he had a mini flashback. He was in Planet Adventure listening to the Hartleys squabbling over the map. "I was thinking about those letter number codes on the treasure map," he went on. "They can't be coordinates because I'm sure there was no grid on the map, but they're something like that rather than a code." Emily nodded. If Maddox had had a compass with him, he couldn't have given the directions and the number of the paces of walk, like North 6 or something. Jack shook his head. "Naughty elephant squirt water." "What are you talking about?" Scott and Emily asked in chorus. "That's how I remember the compass points. North, east, south, west. But the letters on the map are all like FBZ and stuff. So that can't have been what Maddox was on about. If he just had the sat-nav, with him, he could have given us the coordinates and made our lives a lot easier, Jack said. Emily laughed. I don't think they had the GPS in 1902. I don't suppose he had time to pack a supply of hand navigational tools as he escaped from the sinking ship anyway. No, he was too busy loading his treasure chest onto the lifeboat, Jack pointed out. But a heap of gold bars or nuggets wouldn't be much use for finding your way around. Scott closed his eyes and tried to think. It was so frustrating. Muddock's system had to be simple enough for him to have come up with at night in the middle of a storm without any fancy equipment. So why was it so hard to figure out? Emily sighed. Come on, let's go and find Mrs. Loveday. We might as well get started. Jack scowled. No way. I vote we go to Gull Island. Scott wasn't in the mood for another showdown between Emily and Jack. The last one had almost ended in mortal combat. Let's toss a coin for it. He pulled a 10-piece piece from his pocket and flipped it. Heads, Emily called. Scott uncovered the coin on the back of his hand. Heads it is. Mrs. Loveday, here we come. That's so unfair, Jack groaned. I wanted to call. But Scott didn't hear Jack's protest. He was staring down at the coin, at the Queen's profile and the words Elizabeth II, TG, REG, FT, 2008. Round the border. He jumped up and treated Jack and Emily to a triumphant air guitar solo. Oh yeah, I think I've cracked it. Join us next time for Chapter 11. Take care.